Today on Turpentine VC, we're excited to drop an episode of David Weisberg's podcast, How I Invest. The podcast features interviews with the world's leading institutional investors, including pension funds, endowments, and family offices. David has hosted conversations with the top limited partners in the world, including the Ford Foundation, Northwestern University, and CalPERS, as well as the smartest investors in the venture ecosystem. Up ahead is his conversation with Nichole Wischoff. Please enjoy the episode.
Nichole, you pulled off a $50 million fundraise in one of the toughest markets, the summer of 2024. How did you accomplish this?
In terms of strategy, going out in March, telling LPs, I guess I was sort of bluffing, but I believed it, that I would have a first close and ideally on 50% of the fund around the May timeline, and was aiming for a final close in August. And crazy enough, maybe I manifested it, but it worked out. So Sindana came in, anchored the fund, and it was off to the races in 5 months end to end. The other piece, and then I'll pause, is just having a good product, right? So there was some data that came out that was just showing like median IRR and metrics for funds from the 2021 vintage and 22, both of which are my fund 1 and 2. And we're top decile, right? And we had some early markups in fund 2. So the product is also great, right? And our distribution has really taken off. So I think obviously you have to have something that people want to invest in. One part is just the strategy around like how to raise because it's frustrating and time consuming. And the other is, do you actually have something people want, which was the real test. And it turns out that we did.
When you say you have a distribution advantage, what do you mean by that?
So one piece that's been really important for building the firm is obviously brand building. There's a lot of competition, several funds. So assuming we had the pieces right to even be in business, being how do we actually help founders to do this job and why would they choose us? I have a really deep operating experience. So I was very fortunate to be very early and only work with CEO co-founders of 3 now very sizable companies. And so with that, I've raised a ton of venture capital. I've built a ton of products. I've hired and fired and figured things out. So having all of that is sort of table stakes to hopefully getting started in venture. The most important piece is how do you continue to have access to great companies? How do you continue to have the right to win and then concentrate in those companies? And so we have been from day one building up the brand, Twitter being like a core part of the business, but also LinkedIn and TikTok, now with the podcast. And ultimately it's how many people follow us, know who we are, and will pick up our call. And the answer is a lot. So that has been a huge core focus for the brand since we started.
And double click on that. How does media help you win deals?
Ultimately, I can get on the phone with anyone. And I really saw that. That took about 2 years. And then I would want to say about a year ago now, early 2024, I remember there were founders that had term sheets from super notable funds. I typically try not to chase those deals, but I really liked the business they were building. I loved their background. So I remember sending a note on LinkedIn and just saying, like, hey team, would love to meet. I know I'm pretty late in the process, but let me know if you have time. And it was, and since then, in any situation like this, cold message, they respond at 100% of the time. It is, Nichole, I've been following you on X for a long time. You're a hustler. I would absolutely love to take a call with you. We've got $500K left, even though there's a lot of interest. Do you have time tomorrow morning? We have earned that right.
Cold message.
And now I would say that that's probably a response and a quick response time, like almost 100% of the time. And that is to get on the phone with just about anyone. So that is what you get from the socials.
And that also translates into closing as well.
100%. It's a warm relationship. They feel like they know you. And so it's not like going up to someone like at a random coffee shop and like trying to like get them to take your money, even though that's normally what a first call feels like. So it feels like we skipped that part.
What's the limits to that scalability? Would you be able to deploy that into $5 million checks, $10 million checks, or does it only work on small checks?
So far, we are proving that we can increase check size. And, I think that hopefully everything else outside of, okay, Nichole, we want to work with her, but what does she really do? So, right, even though I get on that first call and they love the brand, the next question just becomes like, and I transparently haven't been asked this in a few years, but I don't often get the question anymore from founders like, but why should we choose you? Which is good. So it means some things are working. A lot of it is also references. Like if I'm trying to win a deal, some of my existing portfolio founders like call in and say, hey, you should really work with Nichole. She's been fantastic for us. So that's super helpful. I'd say, look, so far, Fund 1, our average ownership is 0.7%. I think our average check was around $150K. That was the $5 million fund. Fund 2, our average ownership right now is 4.7%. Our average check size is around $650K. So we're swinging pretty, with smaller checks are around 5% of companies. We've easily been able to do that, no question. I think as we get into the $50 million fund strategy, leading and co-leading most of the time and writing up to, let's say, $2 million checks, we will see. But so far, the model has been working.
Was that your biggest objection when you met with LPs and raising a $50 million fund?
No, actually. I'd say the biggest reason people pass is that the fund size was small. So I was really trying to go more institutional, and a $50 million fund is very small for folks that need to write $15 to $25 million checks. I would say that, Sandana, my anchor, gave me an interesting exercise, and I ended up sharing this with a lot of my other LPs, which was, hey, Nichole, if you could layer on top of your Fund 2 positions to date. So of the 12 to 14 companies you've invested in and your check size in Fund 2, which was let's say 650, if you layered on your Fund 3 strategy and went back to those companies, which of those companies do you think that you could have successfully deployed that bigger check into versus not? And it was a great exercise. And I think it ended up being that I would have gotten probably closer to 8.5%, 9% ownership. And then they referenced every single one of my companies. So they validated that. They probably didn't say Nichole says she could have put 2 million in, but it was a good exercise. And I shared that with every LP.
You went public with your process and in your funnel. So walk me through that at a high level.
So out of the gate, I did what I recommend my startups do, which is get every investor in the funnel at the same time. And so out of the gate, I set up 80 calls. Out of the total 108 first calls. So I think the pipeline was between existing and folks I had already met prior to raising, that was 80. And so within the first 3 weeks of the raise in March, I had several calls a day, like 7 to 9, I think was my max, some 45 minutes, some an hour. And I wanted to get everyone in the data room at the same time. I wanted them to know that was the goal of the May 1st close, the final close in August. And so that was what I stuck to. Again, no idea if that was going to work out, but I put my head down and that was what the expectation was. In reality, it took to get to 50% raised and closed that 2.5 to 3 months. And then from there, that remaining 50% of the funds, so 25 million, took 30 days. I can speak more to that. And then the final month of that, so let's say we were 4 months in, was really just legal back and forth. So red lines on the LPA, getting doc signed is honestly tons of legwork and actually really expensive from a legal perspective. But that took up about a month of it. So of the 108 calls, 28 committed. So we converted about 26%. I don't have benchmarks for other funds. I don't know if that's great. I don't know if it's terrible. It worked for us. It's a good number. We got it done. An interesting stat, 38.5 million of the 50 million are from 6 LPs. So we really have 4 or 5 $5 million checks and then one $15 million check. And then the rest are 2 million, 1 million, and then a very, very few existing LPs that really wanted to come back in, but I've outgrown that wrote 500K checks.
How did you get people to commit to the first close so quickly? In other words, what was your forcing mechanism for getting the first 50% in?
So that's a really good question. All existing folks, I think there were a few folks there's specifically single family offices that I had really gotten to know that missed Fund 2 that said, Nichole, no matter what, when you start raising, we want in for $1 million. And so that was 3 checks that came in.
Was this after your Fund 2 was closed? Was it at the tail end they couldn't get their diligence? Why did they miss Fund 2?
It was closed. They saw, I think, some press and they're we really want to meet Nichole. And is there any chance you can increase the $20 million fund size and take more capital? And the answer was no. And so we kept in touch for 2 years. And so whenever I kicked it off, they were very quick to say, send the docs, we're in, we stand by wanting to commit $1 million. And I catch up with folks. I try to at least 2 to 3 times per year. This is a relationship business. So for the folks also I really I wanted to spend more time with them. So was really, determined to building those relationships. So the May 1 is a really important date. And I tweeted about this, but so when I kicked off in March, I had probably, close by May 1. So in that first, let's say 2 months or until May 1st, March, April, almost, that's, a little bit. So over 2 months in, I had commitments, verbal commitments. People were in for just shy of $10 million. And I kept saying, so Sandana had anchored Fund 1 and 2, but they took a little bit to let me know. So I told all LPs, listen, I expect half the fund to be reserved for existing investors. And so Sandana, I'll never forget, calls me on May 1, and I was 9 months pregnant. And they said, Nichole, we're in for 15 million. And our only ask of you is that you cap the fund at 50 instead of 60. As I mentioned back in October, I had floated a $60 million fund cap to existing LPs. And so they ended up coming in for 30% of the fund. I was like, of course, I'll cap the fund. I ended up being way oversubscribed and they would not budge. But that was the process. And so I had already had, again, I said the 10, they came in for 15, we're at 50%. I raced to a close, 3 weeks after that. So I think it was the end of May. And I got great advice, which I think we'll get into, which was send little drip campaigns, to existing LPs, send them little drip notes saying, hey, here's the progress over the last 2 to 3 weeks. So they feel like they're close to it, that the timeline seemed tangible. Again, back to when this closes, not if this closes. And so on May 1st, when Thindana called me and they committed, and I knew I was like going to have that big first close, like I hoped and manifested, I emailed every single person that was still in the pipeline and just said, and again, this is a good forcing function too. And I even recommend my startups do this. People will hang around the hoop, and largely because they're just not interested and can't get there. And you need to suss that out as quickly as possible and move on. And so I emailed every single person in the pipeline and just said, hey, here's the update, huge first close on 50% of the fund. We're still marching towards mid-August for a final close. Let me know if you want to catch up. 25% of people who ended up passing, or maybe 30, passed because of the timeline. Some I just wasn't a big fit for. And then the other big reason why people passed were because the fund size was just too small and their checks were too big for the fund, which I also appreciate. I don't want a $25 million check for a $50 million fund. So those were a few of the reasons. One was just the tight timeline, and 2 was the fund size.
How do you suss out who's actually interested and who's just hanging on the hoop because they don't want to say no?
So I guess what isn't fair, for LPs is that they do have their own internal timeline. And so it is a balancing act. Sometimes they are not hanging around the hoop. They are actually hoping that they have another 60 days. And so in some cases, I've had LPs say, hey, Nichole, they work on like quarters most of the time. And so they're like, hey, Q3 is not great for us. If this goes into Q4, we're very in. And so a lot of them were hanging around the hoop, hoping that this would hit like an October 1 timeline and we'd be a Q4 investment. And so a lot of them, when I was getting closer and it was directly within like the August timeframe that I had hoped for, they had to pass. And people communicate that. Or if they try to gatekeep their timeline because they don't want you to write them off, then they're you force their hand. And so a lot of it was just saying, hey, we're still marching towards this. Do you want to catch up? But eventually they just let you know. I'd say by the third touch point, they give you an answer, and it's really helpful. But you kind of have to force it. I mean, again, sometimes they do convert. It just depends on their timeline and your timeline.
Is it a fair characterization to say the top quartile LPs are very independent when it comes to their decision-making, and some of the other LPs are looking for signals?
Sometimes it's hard to read through the lines. And so I actually don't know that it dictated much. Like, I think, even when I closed my first institutional, Children's came in and I circulated a note and said, hey, we're now at 35 million. We're almost finished, or 40 million. It didn't rush anyone's process, which just told me that if they're going to come in, they're going to spend time with you from the start. And even if there's not a lot of early signal, and if they're not, they're not. But maybe a few single family offices get excited and they try to follow great LPs, and I don't blame them. But I honestly felt like there was no carrot that I was hanging that got people in or out, even if it was new news on LPs.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Even if you think it's a bit overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere, from self-driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? Time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, plus all your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking. So you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI for new US customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/turpentine. That's oracle.com/turpentine. Hey everyone, Eric here. In this environment, founders need to become profitable faster and do more with smaller teams, especially when it comes to engineering. That's why Sean Lanahan started Squad, a specialized global talent firm for top engineers that will seamlessly integrate with your org. Squad offers rigorously vetted top 1% talent that will actually work hard for you every day. Their engineers work in your time zone, follow your processes, and use your tools. Squad has front-end engineers excelling in TypeScript and React and Next.js ready to onboard to your team today. For back-end, Squad engineers are experts at Node.js, Python, Java, and a range of other languages and frameworks. While it may cost more than the freelancer on Upwork billing you for 40 hours, but working only 2, Squad offers premium quality at a fraction of the typical cost, without the headache of assessing for skills and culture fit. Squad takes care of sourcing, legal compliance, and local HR for global talent. Increase your velocity without amping up burn. Visit choosesquad.com and mention Turpentine to skip the waitlist.
You mentioned that one endowment told you that they have a 12-month policy before they could even invest. They have to know you for 12 months. Tell me about that.
That was the only time I've heard that. I will say, though, and I don't know if it is fair to say that this is all endowments. I do know, I was talking to a few other funds that got a few LPs in, and they said, Nichole, we closed them in 4 months. It was just a really tight, or got to a commitment in 4 months, and then legal takes like another 2. I don't know that it's that common, though. I will say endowments are just a different beast. I don't have, candidly, any endowments as LPs yet, though I've been getting to know several for the past, a year and a half or 2 years. I find that in a lot of cases, either my fund size is too small, like think a Yale or someone that's huge, or a lot of what I experience is that these endowments are trying to get exposure to emerging managers, but they have never invested in one. And so it's a lot of phone calls, but no one's converting. But I don't think that's just because of my fund. I think they're just not writing checks yet and just assessing the market.
You got a lot of help from other emerging managers like Charlie Ma and Byron at 12 Below. Tell me more about that.
Look, we are all incentivized to help each other. So we're thankfully not all raising at the same time, but a few things. One, it didn't dictate. So I would never dictate when I'm going to go to market to raise a fund based on feedback from other GPs about the timing of the market. And actually, thankfully, I didn't do that because I feel like 100% of the time over the last 3 years, GPs say it's a bad time to raise, and it is a bad time to raise since 21. And so you can't let that dictate when you go to market. Ultimately, when do you need the capital is when you should go to market. Again, as I said before, if it could have taken 18 months, I didn't want to be in a position where I didn't have capital to deploy. And so I went out earlier. And then from there, I did the around the world and I called everyone that I knew that had raised and closed a fund in the past 6 months. And because that's usually a good benchmark for where the market is, including, Charlie and Madi at Pathlight, and, Byron at 12 Below, and just said, walk me through your raise. I want to better understand the process, who is active. So something that at least I do with other managers, I'm not sure how common this is outside of my little bubble, but we all usually will share a spreadsheet and say, hey, here's everyone I've met with. Here's everyone that has converted in our LPs. Here's everyone that you might actually be a great fit for because they're looking for A, B, and C. And so a lot of us try to just share, who are the LPs that are active. And frankly, who are the ones that waste your time? There are folks that are just not active that are out there. They want to talk, and then they maybe want a lot of things from you. Like they want to direct invest in some of your companies, and they, there's some bad actors. It's not that common, but when you're raising a fund, you don't want to waste any time. And so the guys I mentioned were all extremely helpful in saying, hey, Nichole, here are the top 5 institutionals, if you want to go institutional, that are looking at emerging managers. We are one. They came in, they have more exposure this year that we think that you should meet. And we always help each other. I mean, it's one, I can do the same for them. So I'd say every time I get one of these lists, there's probably up to maybe 35% overlap with LPs. So that's not crazy. There's still a lot of open relationships to build. And that goes both ways. So when Charlie and Madi get ready to go for their next one, or Byron, I hope they do call me and say, hey, Nichole, who should we meet? But it's really common and it's very helpful.
And how did you build these very trusted relationships? I think a lot of people would love to have these kind of relationships.
I've taken a very community-driven approach to all of this. I think it takes a village to get a fund off the ground. And I think it probably takes one to run it. It's just different needs. Ultimately, you are your network. And so I wanted to start dipping my hands into different networks and working with people that, one, are awesome. So there's plenty of fund managers I met that I was like, that is not a relationship I want to build. And there are ones that I just deeply care about. And so for me, it's really natural. Like I want to hang out with Charlie and Madi, even if it's unrelated to the fund. Like I've invited them to my birthday party. And so who are the people I want to spend time with that I can learn from? And also things are give and takes outside of its business, right? So outside of helping each other on the fun stuff, and there's great emerging manager group chats where we're all constantly some of the best early managers. I would say some are now far from emerging and they have emerged, but that are always talking about who do you use for legal on this? Or how do you think about opportunity funds? Like we're all trying to help each other, which is awesome. I think the other part is also deals. So if you want to meet everyone that's kind of either going to mark up your companies or co-invest with you. And so how can I find like minds? The Charlies and Madis I've done deals with, Byron at 12 Below. We were talking about a deal this morning. And so you just, keep the doors open and really just kind of just feed these relationships because they're really important.
Do you find that there's an 80-20 aspect to your relationships, like a small amount of your relationships drive a lot of your co-investors and a lot of the help on the fund?
Yes. So Lee Fixel's a mentor and a friend, and I'll never forget, I was probably 2 years into this. I'm now 3, so I guess a year ago. And when I first got started, I cast a huge net. I was like, and I was all over the internet, as I mentioned. I was always posting, still am. And I started to try to do deals with a lot of people, a lot of fund managers that, their names are splashed all over the headlines, like the up and coming GP, whatever. And I wanted to meet everybody and I wanted to do deals with them. And this is again, I think at pre-seed and seed, it takes a village on a cap table. I think as you scale, you don't need as many funds. So, in every round, that is. And so started doing business with a lot of people, and you learn pretty quickly who you do not want to do business with. A lot of it is just their acumen with founders. Sometimes it's from a sense of entitlement, but I've made introductions to my founders say how well do you know that person? That call was terrible. Or a lack of follow through or things that are really important to me. You're going to get your shit done if you work with my founders, right? You're a reflection of me, and these introductions are a reflection of me. And so I remember saying to Lee, gosh, I cast a wide net and I met I probably 50 other fund managers. And I was like, is it crazy that the list of people I trust and want to work with is probably 8 of the 50? And he's like, no, absolutely not. He's like, I did the same thing when I was early at Tiger. And you cast a wide net, you meet a lot of people, and then that list becomes 8 to 10. So that's happening now. And I'm still trying to add people in and maybe push people out. But there's only a small group of people that you really trust, and that trust takes time.
Yeah, almost literally 20%. So you've built up an enormous Twitter followers on a relative basis to VC. Walk me through how you built up your Twitter followers in the very beginning.
Yes. So I was not on Twitter and using any form of social media outside of Instagram personally, probably until 2021. So I raised my first fund while I was still operating at a startup. I just had my head down, knew all of the LPs, and had great access. So I was like, great, let's do this. We had a $5 million fund. And I'm in a group chat with Aaron Frank, who is at the time an amazing angel investor that fell into the deep dark side and started as a partner at Lightspeed. I say that in a loving way. And Alex Cohen, who's a popular shit poster and now a founder himself on Twitter. And they said, Nichole, you just closed a $5 million fund. You're a VC now. You have to get on Twitter. And so then I hard launched September 2021 saying, hey, I just raised a $5 million fund. Who should I meet? Again, and knowing nothing about it, I think a quick take too, as I spent a few months on it, was people are absolutely nuts. VC Twitter is unhinged, absolutely ridiculous. And I'll get into what I really think about it. But, and so my first tweet that really took off, and I was like, wait, I need to keep pouring fuel on this, was I posted something I call my first heater. I had maybe 200 followers, and I said, can confirm it's 10x easier to raise a $5 million fund than to get 500 Twitter followers. And Alex and Aaron, Alex at the time had 100,000 followers, they retweet this and it totally takes off. I get to my first 1,000 followers. And after that, I can't really remember. I would say I think those first 1,000 are the most difficult.
Is that a social proof aspect? You get to 1,000 and now people take you seriously? Or why are those first 1,000 so much more difficult?
It's human psychology. I don't know. I think you click into someone's profile and you're like, oh, they're kind of legit. People I know follow them. Because if you have 1,000 followers, you have at least one mutual with almost everyone second degree. And so I think when they see that there's at least 1 or 2 mutuals, you become more legitimate. I feel that 1,000 just sticks out on Twitter. And so maybe that's just a personal take, but it felt like that was the hardest. And then after that, it felt like it was much faster to get going. I think that a few things, and these are I don't know, hot takes maybe I'll regret saying later, but like VC Twitter is kind of broken up into like, I'd say like 3 different personas, like pending for, which maybe is the bucket I fall into. One, you have like the deeply insecure billionaires who argue with each other all the time. And then you have, I think 2, they're either associates or partners with like a tiny P who just shadow the rich guys and try to be bullies on the internet, who pitch the same book and call themselves contrarian. And then you have the like total sweethearts who are the partners who like know that building a brand really matters. But they're so uncomfortable posting online and they are way too afraid to look stupid and to be judged that they literally just post humbled and honored to be a part of like Series A. And then that's the Twitter feed. I'd say what is, I guess, totally like original and really interesting are the really authentic accounts. I don't know if I can like say that I'm a part of this, but maybe it's what I'm going for, where I just don't give a shit, right? Like if people, and by that I mean, I don't mind getting beat up on the internet. What I like about Twitter is that people tell you you're an idiot and that you're wrong. And in some cases they're right. And that's refreshing. I learned something, like I'll go rethink, whatever it is that I posted. I have the courage to be myself, which I think is actually like the like very, very limited in the world. And so for better or worse, like people follow me because I've been open and I've taken an approach that's I'm going to build this firm in public. I'm going to say what I think. I'm going to say that I don't really buy that there's a lot of money to be made in AI, and I'll stand by it. And someone can point back to that and say, she was wrong. The benefit of doing what I do and never working at a big fund is that I don't have like an issue with groupthink, and I don't sit around at big firms and weekly partner meetings and get brainwashed by like the only things that the partners say can work at the fund. And look, founders love it. So the most important thing is I am relatable to founders because I'm building something. It's really hard. And I'm saying what I think along the way, even if I might be wrong. And they feel like that it's relatable. And frankly, so do other VCs. Like, so a lot of times I get messages like, thanks for saying, what I can't say. So whatever, we ride at midnight.
What would be your advice to somebody trying to build out their Twitter brand today?
I would say the people that really want to do it and are going to be just really good at it are the people that don't even have to ask me. I say that because usually the people, and GPs, by the way, reach out a lot. Either they have their own funds or they're at like multi-stage funds. They're like, Nichole, I know this is important. Like, how do I do it? Those people that are in that third bucket. The short answer is if you have to ask that, you're going to be too uncomfortable to probably do it because it is cringy. And I think cringe scales, but a lot of folks are really afraid of that. And I got a text from, I won't put him on blast, but like a notable seed fund GP, one of my LPs. And he said, he's like, Nichole, he's like, we're doing the podcast thing. I'm leaning in on socials. Like, you were totally right. He's like, cringe scales, basically alluding to my content probably. And he was like, you were right, like 2 years ago. Like, this is an area where you have to invest. It's the future. And I've always said that. And so I mean, the short of it is, if you do need the advice on how to have better tweets, maybe it's working, but it's not like taking off, is you have to have something unique to say and have an opinion. And so a lot of people will tweet, the sky is blue. It's like, great. Well, how do you feel about that? Is that shitty? Is that amazing? Like, have an opinion. You don't have to be relatable, but try to be to the masses, as in stick to your niche. So if it's VCs, don't break up. Don't ever post about anything other than the VC for probably the first 12 months. Like, I've gotten more personal. I'll talk about family. I'll talk about things where people get to know me, but you really don't want to go off script for a little while, and keep them short. So people writing novels and trying to, like, no one has time for someone they don't know to read 3 paragraphs. They have time to read, like 2 sentences. So stick to those things. And
do you have a power law to your posts? Like, do like 1% of your posts end up leading to most of your growth, or is it more linear?
Definitely more linear. Even when I think back to like notable moments, like, wait, I announce a new fund, I'll get maybe 1,000 new or 2,000 more followers, which is always like, it's big news. I would say from a single post, maybe the most followers I've gotten is like 2,000 to 3,000. I think even there was like the Keith Your Boy 3rd tier VC thing that happened a couple of years ago. And I think there was probably 2,500 or 3,000 followers that came from that. But right now we're close to 100,000. So that's not crazy. I'd say on average, there's a stat counter I follow. On average, I think I grow between like 70 and 100 like followers a day if I post every day. So it's just consistent. It takes time. I mean, everyone thinks there's overnight success. It's taken me almost 3 years to get to 100,000 followers. And that's posting 1 to 2 times a day for that long.
Well, Nichole, we've been in contact since I think roughly May. You were in your 9th month pregnancy, raising your fund. You certainly did not disappoint. How could people follow you and get in touch?
So one, I'm super active on X and my DMs are open. So that's probably the fastest path to a response. And then my handle is just Wischoff. So my last name. You can shoot me a DM on LinkedIn as well, Nichole Wischoff. And my email is nicole@wischoff.com. So not really creative here, but would love to be in touch. And again, DMs are open everywhere.
Great. Thank you, Nichole.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Turpentine VC is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen and Econ 102. If you liked the episode, please leave a review in the Apple Store or rate us on Spotify. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of How I Invest with David Weisberg. His show is currently ranked in the top 3 on Apple's investing podcast chart. Make sure to subscribe by following the links in our show notes. Hey everyone, Eric here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at eric@turpentine.co. That's ERIK @turpentine.co, and let's partner together.